Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism, narcissistic relationships, and healing from narcissistic relationships. And let's talk a little bit about bullying, but more specific about when people are bullied in narcissistic family systems. This word bullying is an interesting one. Sort of our apocryphal take on what a bully is that surly, oversized kid at school who is waiting for you at the school gate or steals lunch money or puts really terrible stuff online or is otherwise a menace that torments one or more kids at school. And that's one version. And it's, like I said, in the online world, this whole bullying thing has gone to a whole new level. But we know overall bullying goes much further. By definition, bullies go after vulnerable folks. Bullying is repetitive, and it is based on intimidation and coercion. Bullying can involve humiliation, mockery, physical threats, and it's always predicated on the bully going after someone who has less power than them. And that imbalance is sort of a central pillar of the concept of bullying. But we know that bullying doesn't just happen on a schoolyard, right? It can also happen in workplace settings. Workplace bullying is a very real thing where a boss or even a more senior colleague bullies and intimidates less empowered colleagues. And the less power those colleagues have, the more bullied they may be. Lots of people would say that their first experience with bullying was school. Clearly, the bullies, I have to say, probably aren't watching this channel. But by and large, that's when most people were first bullied. However, if you're from a narcissistic family system, I'm willing to hazard a guess that perhaps some of your first experiences with bullying may very well have happened within the confines of your family system. Families, narcissistic families, are sadly, they're set up for bullying like almost no other system, right? Children are vulnerable people. Parents, caregivers are more powerful people. That's sort of built into the system. Now, obviously, when a family is healthy and loving, there's no bullying. But that's not what's happening in the narcissistic family system. And some of this can also come down to siblings. Remember those family roles we always talk about? Golden child, scapegoat, peacekeeper, fixer, invisible child, all of that. A lot of that can come down to who is being bullied. And by definition, the scapegoat is invariably the bullied one. Now, the primary way that bullying can show up in narcissistic family systems is often called mobbing, or specifically something called family mobbing, whereby the family bully has what we call either their flying monkeys or at the very least their accomplices, who may not be directly involved in the bullying, but who support and reward and sort of cheer on the bully. Like I said, this could be literally cheering the bully on or laughing about the harm that the bully is inflicting on the other person, to almost like building on the bully's power to pile on to the person already being bullied and magnifying their own senses of power, right? The co-mobbers, as it were, may or may not be bullies themselves. And in family systems, the sort of joining in on the bullying may also be a trauma-bonded form of survivalism to stay attached to or safe from the core bullier, who is often a parent or a caregiver, but it could also be an older sibling. And for those who were mobbing accomplices in a family system, but not bullies themselves and not narcissistic, down the road, they may experience shame and a sense of complicity that becomes their load to carry and work through. Now, family bullying makes family systems incredibly unsafe from the jump. And to be in a bullied family system can impede attachment, psychological safety, identity development, and sense of self. It can also, by extension, affect engagement in school, foster a sense of the bullied child being distracted. Basically, the child has now gotten the message that even the most fundamental structure, the family, is not safe. But family bullying doesn't stop in childhood. It can trail well into adulthood. And we often see a sort of organized psychological abuse and control that can pervade a person's life as long as they have contact with the bully, who may no longer physically be as imposing, because you've grown up too, but will continue to bully through intimidation, humiliation, verbal aggression, and fostering a sense of isolation of the person they're bullying. While family bullying in a narcissistic family system can affect multiple, I mean, in this case, I'm using a victim just to keep things simple. I don't love the word, right? But multiple victims. It can do that, or it can all be focused on one scapegoated person in the family system. Some of this may come down to how large the family system is, more people to go after, the ages of the kids in the system, whether it's still like the biological parents, step parents, all of that, right? But in a narcissistic family system, and especially when the violence is not physical, but rather emotional or psychological or verbal, it can be more difficult to spot these bullying patterns. Hell, I have seen adult family systems bully family members through group texts and social media. Power is power, and bullies need it no matter what, even if everyone's grown up and we're no longer talking about kids. Think about what bullying does to people. We know that bullying saps people's sense of power in the world. It leaves people in a chronic state of fear. And the bullied person will try all sorts of workarounds to avoid the bully's wrath. But because the bullying dynamic can often usurp or steal a person's autonomy, the bullied person often faces one of two extremes. They either desperately try to flee the system or they get imprisoned into it. There's really no middle ground. The fleeing the bullying system can be tricky because it can often mean a person throwing themselves into the world without being developmentally ready or having the resources or the preparation or the guidance. So the person fleeing one bullying system may enter new spaces in a very vulnerable way and be at risk for being preyed upon by new perpetrators. For example, let's say somebody flees the system and moves out too young with an older boyfriend or something. Or people get stuck because the bullying rhetoric sticks and you actually believe that you are all of the terrible things you were told. And then the bully has, the bullying parent could have the adult child or whatever family members involved forever sort of in their power and stuck. So this begs the question, are all bullies narcissistic? I mean, bullies likely take in, there's probably more territory here, but the vast majority are in that antagonistic world of narcissism, psychopathy, sociopathy, or a mix of antagonistic qualities. There are things like power-seeking, insecure, poorly regulated, impulsive, emotionally stunted, supply-seeking, lacking empathy, deeply entitled. You pour all those ingredients into a blender, you probably have a bully. And while all people with these characteristics don't bully, nearly all bullies have these characteristics. When we talk about school or workplace bullying, most of us are on the same page about the different ways it looks. But we less so use this languaging in families, where we may be more likely to soft pedal with the idea that, well, families are all different, or this might be how some families are, or maybe that's just a stern disciplinarian parent, or maybe it's cultural, or maybe everyone's just roughhousing, and maybe that's how siblings talk. Actually, no. And because family bullying tends to occur in the child who's still developing a sense of self, of self-worth, of attachment, it can upend these crucial developmental processes. In a family, bullying could be viewed as a sort of place of where coercive behavior meets narcissistic abuse, but it's long-term and severe. I personally think coercive control is a more structured terminology for what in essence is relationship bullying, where a person is chronically intimidated and humiliated and lives in fear of the menace held by the bullier or the narcissistic person or the coercer. Many of us have been bullied at various times in our lives. I'll own mine. When I was younger in school, throughout my K to 12, I was bullied. And the big takeaways I got from being chronically bullied was, I don't fit in anywhere, it's my fault, I wish I was cooler, prettier, I wish I was like the other kids. And the workarounds I had as a child were to hide, try not to attract attention to myself, leave school quickly before the bullies could catch up to me, walk home different ways so that they couldn't find me. And the physiological fallout for me as a child was everything from bedwetting to nightmares to solitude. So it very much fits a post-traumatic profile, in this case for a child. And the taking of responsibility, which I took onto myself, it's my fault for not being more socially skilled, similar to narcissistic abuse, and the sense of social exclusion can also connect to what happens to people who are being bullied in families. Social exclusion from peers is bad enough, but to have that impending sense of social exclusion in a family system feels like the stuff of terrifying children's stories of being put out into a cold and scary world on a cold and scary night. And that is the fear that bullied children live with, that your fate is tenuous within that bullying family system. I also remember a story back to middle school. It wasn't me being bullied. There was a terrible bully in the middle school. Even his mother was a bully. And he had lots of other boys who were part of his system, and they participated in the mobbing, right? The school was absolutely worthless in its responses. It was the damn 1970s. So it was like lawlessness and anarchy. And there was a boy in one of my classes who was a little bit odd, but he was smart. He was also quite tall. But kids went after him a lot. And that particular year was better than average for me because I wasn't experiencing as much bullying. But that really awful bully boy, he was not academically gifted, but he would taunt this boy who was in my class. One day, the boy in my class who was taunted yelled at the bully to stop. And the bully escalated and said he would see him after school right outside the school grounds for a fight. And the boy who was taunted, the bullied boy, agreed to it. I can still evoke the feelings from that day. What I was thinking about is like, yeesh. And I was terrified for the bullied boy. And the night before their proclaimed fight, I couldn't sleep. And I wasn't even friends with the kid that was going to get beaten up. Systems that permit bullying to happen harm everyone in them. The bully, though, actually disappeared from our school system. I think he went on to a different school, but I read about him years down the road. Bullied people typically blame themselves. They don't blame the system. And kids in particular don't have that luxury. And our survival need to maintain attachment means that we're going to come for ourselves quicker than we are willing to recognize that the system is effed. Schools still are not doing great with this, and social media and online abuse have created a terrible and problematic new paradigm for whatever the new equivalent is for waiting at the school fence. But we also don't like the destabilization that happens from having to recognize that systems like schools or systems like families are broken. But for those of you who felt you were bullied by a family and wonder if that is a thing or that you still are, it is a thing. It could be treated as something very close to chronic coercive control, and the harms, especially when it is within systems we are supposed to trust, like families, are significant. I think a lot of us understand one-on-one bullying quite well. It's a lot harder to get our heads around the idea that an entire system can be bullying. Thanks again.